Welcome to our web tutorial on responding to fixed availability challenges that are submitted as part of the Commission's new Broadband Data Collection, or BDC. I'm Jean Cadieux, Chair of the FCC's Broadband Data Task Force. Over the past few months, the FCC has collected information from Internet service providers across the country on locations where their broadband service is available. Now that we have released maps rendering that data, individual members of the public and third-party stakeholders, such as state and tribal governments, can challenge the availability data at particular locations. We're making this online tutorial available to assist fixed broadband service providers who need to respond to such individual and bulk challenges. We hope that it's helpful. Additional resources are available at www.fcc.gov/broadbanddata under the Resources and Education headings. You can also submit questions to our Help Center at that website, which, again, is www.fcc.gov/broadbanddata. Thank you again for taking time to watch this tutorial and for your effort to help us improve the maps. I will turn it over now to Karen Sprung, Counsel to the Task Force, who will take you through the tutorial.
In this portion of the webinar, I will discuss the timelines for responding to challenges, as well as issues that can come up as you navigate the process. The process formally begins when a fixed availability challenge, either an individual challenge for a single location, usually submitted by a consumer, or a bulk challenge covering multiple locations, is filed against a provider's report of service availability at one or more locations. Individual challengers may choose from one of the following bases for their challenge. Provider failed to schedule a service installation within 10 business days of challenger's request. Provider did not install the service within 10 business days of a request. Provider requested more than the standard installation fee to connect the location. Provider denied the request for service. Provider does not offer the reported technology at the location. Provider does not offer the speed or speeds shown on the broadband map for purchase at the location. No signal is available at the location, for satellite or terrestrial fixed wireless only. New, non-standard equipment is required to connect this location, for satellite or fixed wireless only. Bulk challengers can submit challenges based on these methodologies. Knowledge of infrastructure. Challengers dispute availability or other reported data, for example, speed or transmission technology, based on first-hand awareness of provider's network infrastructure. Information collected from individual consumers. Challengers aggregate information from individuals about their locations, which must be based on one of the categories I described for individual challenges. Other. Challengers submit information that doesn't fall within the scope of the prior two methodologies. This might, for example, be based on data from a provider's website that showed service was not offered at specified locations. Initial processing. Challenge submissions first undergo a preliminary review by FCC staff to screen for whether any required elements are missing. Challenge submissions that staff determine lack critical information are rejected at this stage. For each challenge that is accepted, a notification is sent to the provider's default data contact entered in the Entity Information page in the BDC system. The notification will come as an email from Broadband Map Notifications at fcc.gov. The BDC data contact should take steps to ensure that transmissions from this email address will not be impeded by spam filters or other features of their networks. The BDC data contact should also ensure that the notification will be promptly routed to whoever in your organization will be responsible for responding to challenges, if that isn't the BDC data contact. If a challenge is submitted for a holding company or provider name shown on the broadband map that has multiple FRNs associated with it, the accepted challenge will be shared with each FRN in the BDC system, and the data contact associated with each FRN will receive an email notification. Therefore, the relevant affiliated entity can respond to the challenge, and only one entity needs to respond. Provider initial response. Providers have 60 days from the notification of a challenge to submit a response in the BDC system. This is the maximum period for responding, and we strongly encourage providers to respond more quickly if possible, particularly for challenges that they concede or that present relatively straightforward scenarios. In responding, providers may either concede the challenge or dispute the challenge allegations. When a provider concedes the allegations in a challenge, it is responsible for updating its availability data for the relevant as-of date within 30 days to conform to the terms of a challenge. For example, if a challenger asserts that a provider's service isn't available at a particular location, and if the provider concedes that fact, the provider must within 30 days remove the location from its availability data on file in the BDC. As mentioned in the system walkthrough, there is a streamlined option for effecting the required availability data updates by accepting the challenge assertions in the BDC system and certifying to the change. This obviates the need to do a full refile of the provider data in the BDC system, and we encourage you to use this option to the extent that you're able to. If a provider disputes the allegation or allegations raised by the challenger, the provider must provide evidence in the BDC system and to the challenger that the provider makes service available and is willing to serve the challenged location, or otherwise counters the challenger's assertions. For example, providing evidence that the location has access to service that uses the technology reported in the BDC, if the challenge is based on the type of technology reported. This step is a provider's sole opportunity to submit evidence that the Commission will rely on to determine the outcome of the challenge, if the challenge isn't resolved between the two parties. Accordingly, providers should be as thorough as possible in submitting evidence at this step. In their initial showing, individual challengers are required to have asserted facts indicating that a location is most likely unserved or that service availability is otherwise not consistent with the provider's reported data for the location. The challenge provider must then counter this assertion by a preponderance of the evidence. Bulk challengers must support their initial challenge with clear and convincing evidence, which is also the standard for providers to counter bulk challenge assertions. Providers have latitude in how they respond to challenges. We expect their responses to vary depending on what a challenger submits with its challenge and how providers manage information about how they provision service, as well as other factors. While each challenge must be assessed on the evidence submitted by the parties, we anticipate that following some general principles will increase the effectiveness of this process. Address each material element of a challenge directly, clearly, and with fact-based evidence. For example, if a challenger asserts that service using the reported technology is not available at the location, the response should specifically demonstrate that the disputed technology is available there. Provide documentation to support factual assertions, preferably documentation created extemporaneously with the events described therein. For example, if a challenger asserts that service is not offered at a location as reported, documentation of service offers made to, received by, and then rejected by the challenger could support a finding against the challenger. If you are submitting diagrams, maps, photos, or other visual representations of an area, you should include legends, labels, or other explanatory information so that the challenger and Commission staff can readily understand what they represent and how they are relevant to your response. Consider that the challenger and/or Commission staff may not be as familiar as the provider with some circumstances associated with the challenge or the response. Provide explanations where appropriate so that the response can be understood within its four corners. For example, not requiring inferences or information outside the submitted evidence. 60-day period for provider/challenger resolution efforts. Once a provider indicates in the BDC system that it is disputing a challenge, the provider and the challenger have 60 days to attempt to resolve the challenge. During this period, a provider has an opportunity to reach out to the challenger to indicate that it does not have service available at the challenger's location or otherwise explain why its availability data are correct. We therefore expect that providers will initiate and, if appropriate, maintain a dialogue with the challenger using the point of contact listed with the challenge and shown in the BDC system. This dialogue should include communicating information that the challenger may not have understood about the availability of the provider's service. If a provider is able to reach an agreement with a challenger during this period, either for or against the challenger's initial position, the provider should enter the system as soon as possible to indicate the outcome and, to the extent the provider agrees with the challenge, revise the availability data accordingly. We strongly encourage providers to address challengers' assertions expeditiously and attempt to reach resolution of challenges, or as many elements of challenges as possible, before the end of the 60-day period. Note that providers and challengers can resolve each element of a bulk challenge independently. The challenge process is important to the FCC's development of highly accurate availability data. Among the aspects of the BDC challenge process that we will monitor are individual instances or patterns of conduct that suggest non-compliance with rules. The provider must report in the BDC system by the end of the second 60-day period the outcome of each challenge it disputes. If the provider continues to dispute the challenge at this point, it must provide a reason. FCC adjudication. If a provider reports that a challenge wasn't resolved within 60 days, the challenge will be referred for adjudication by the FCC. The FCC will assess the evidence submitted in the BDC system and make a determination in favor of the challenger or in favor of the provider. In the case of bulk challenges, the FCC may partially agree or disagree after separately adjudicating all of the individual submissions in the bulk challenge. In the case of a finding in favor of the challenger, the provider will have 30 days to revise its data consistent with the decision. Note that the streamlined option will be available at this point to facilitate revisions. To conclude, we sincerely appreciate providers' efforts to address challenges in a constructive fashion in the challenge process. Your participation is a vital aspect to the overall effectiveness and success of the broadband data collection, and we stand ready to assist you as you work through this process.